Hello, Namaste, Salam, Sat Sri Akal, Adab, Kem Cho. Welcome to another episode on Sanguine Conversations. First of all, a very warm congratulations and celebrations on the Republic Day of India. Today, we talk with Mr. Shakti Sinha, who has been a former bureaucrat, IAS batch of 1979, and has worked very closely and intimately with Mr. Vajpayee from 1996 up until 1999 as his secretary. He has penned down a new book called The Years That Changed India, Vajpayee. Welcome to the episode, sir. How are you?
Thank you, Sam.
Right. So, first of all, while reading the book, I came across two to three things that, before we start discussion, I would really like to point out. One of the thing was that the book is written thematically, where all the major issues, especially between the period of 1998 to 1999, are discussed. So, the book actually ends about 1999,
Yeah.
and then the other part of the book is that it, which could have ended up being a hagiography, is not actually. So when it is seen throughout the book that when Mr. Shakti feels that the book should criticize, in his opinion, the decision that was taken, he criticizes. When he thinks that Vajpayee was not being assertive enough, he mentions. So the book is a complete account, in a way, a very, if not completely unbiased, a very less biased account of things. There is a very good humor attached to the whole book. Not only are the incidents from Vajpayee's life, those are there, but also his own frustrations by being a secretary, what all he had to go through, sometimes the summers of Rajasthan, or sometimes the other situations that he had to face because of the kind of job that he had taken up. So humor is also a very consistent theme around the book. In all, the book brings out a lot of facts and sometimes a lot of objective facts which are contrary to popular perception that the book actually brings out. So it's a really interesting book, and here we'll start off our conversation and we'll have few questions with sir.
Look forward. Look forward.
Have some words for the book.
No, I mean, the whole idea of writing this book was, of course, to bring out the developments of that time. And obviously, humor is an important part of life. And yes, it was not a hagiography because I don't think it's worth writing a hagiography. The idea is to better acquaint people with those times, with the difficulties of those times. Because one, I noticed that people are not very aware. And second, that we have selective memory. We remember the good things, we do not remember the downs. That's human survival. And of course, many times we have romantic memories, so we screen out the bad. And many people misrepresent the past for narrow political purposes. So just to correct that, I thought I'll put this together. But the best way to describe the book is to read the book. So while I'm happy to take your questions, I would
Right.
recommend reading the book to everybody who listens to this program. Not because I've written the book, but if you want to understand Indian politics better, I think this is my little attempt to bridge the gap.
Right, right. And the book that we are talking about is actually this. So if you would want to show the book yourself as well. The book is published by Penguin, and the book is a bit lengthy, we can say. It's about 125,000 words. But the point of the book is that it is so interesting that you will not really want to put the book down.
It's a thick book.
So we'll start off about the foreign policy love of Vajpayee first.
So Vajpayee ji had a flair for foreign policy, and his first intervention in the parliament in 1957 was by the question on foreign policy. And interestingly, Nehru ji commented on his question in Hindi. Post emergency, he was appointed as the Minister of External Affairs in Morarji Desai's government, and he was known for his engagements with Pakistan, China, and Israel. How did he come up with all the ideas in the foreign policy, and how did he increase or develop his interest in this area? In this area, right?
That's a very good question, a very difficult question because why did he choose foreign policy? I don't know. But yes, from the beginning, even the poetry he wrote, Nagasaki, he was upset about the bombing dropped in Nagasaki, the non partition, and this feeling that India has to grow into the world. And because of foreign rule, India has been diminished in size. So this was to bother him a lot. It is there in his speeches, poetry, essays that he wrote. And therefore, I think he had a natural interest in foreign policy. Also in the 50s, when Nehru was the prime minister, India was seen as the first large independent country, former colony. It had a bigger role to play in the world than its actual economy decided would have allowed it to do. And therefore, I guess foreign policy came naturally to him, but he worked hard at it. Yes, his first speech in Parliament, substantive speech, was on foreign policy, very lengthy speech, at least in those days, it is lengthy, 10, 12 minutes. Very critical, praises the government, but also is critical of the government. And then subsequently, for the next 40 years, 45 years of his political life, his main love, his main focus, his domain knowledge, if I say, was in foreign policy. It didn't that he got ideas from some one source. I guess experience, the changing world, what India is doing, what India's neighbors are doing, what China is doing, the China-America dynamics, the China-Russia dynamics, the India-Russia dynamics, the India-USA dynamics. So there were many things happening throughout this period. And Vajpayee was a very keen observer of this, spoke on foreign policy in Parliament every year when the budget is discussed, became the foreign minister, and then later when Parliament Standing Committee was there, became its chairman. He was always very focused on foreign policy because he saw foreign policy as the one vehicle, medium required where India could project itself into the world. And the world saw India the way we want to see ourselves and not the way they've been taught to see due to colonial rule. So I guess that was what drove him towards foreign policy. And he developed considerable expertise on it, very, very aware of everything, always keeping track of it, reading, speaking, discussing. So I guess that is where it came from.
Right. Also, Vajpayee was a statesman, and a person has to be statesman even if he is in opposition. But Vajpayee was very clear with his ethical values, and one of it was national interest is uncompromisable. When Mr. Mulayam Singh Yadav was the defense minister, Sukhoi Jet deal came into a lot of controversy, and Vajpayee could have used it for his good by using the controversy. But when he thought that the deal is doing good to our nation and there is no certainty to the doubt of the deal, he planned on supporting the deal and not using it for his favor.
Yeah.
So why don't you speak about some of the incidents like those and talk about that deal in a brief or a detailed way?
Yeah. I mean, for Vajpayee, not just for Vajpayee, but for others of his ideology, the country, the motherland comes first. Even the political party BJP or the Jansang or the RSS is a medium to serve the motherland, and motherland's interest comes first. That was very, very clear. So even on many issues on China, where even they were the critical of Nehru, when it came to the crux, they all rallied behind the government. And throughout, whether it's the nuclear explosion of 1974, even though Indira Gandhi was opposed to Jansang very strongly, he supported it because he said, when the nation comes, we have to rise above politics. So in the sense that he was a statesman, he was a politician, of course. He would not be a statesman without being a politician, but he realized that at a certain moment you have to rise above it. When the Kashmiri issue became 90s, very all over the world, India was getting a bad name. And the Human Human Rights Commission was to discuss, bring a motion to discuss Kashmir, and it had to be stopped. The then Prime Minister Narasimha Rao asked Mr. Vajpayee, then in the opposition, can you lead the government of India delegation to Geneva? Mr. Vajpayee readily agreed. So the Minister of State Foreign Affairs was the deputy leader. He and opposition MP was leading the team. They did a very good job. The motion was defeated. Kashmir was not discussed. So on all these issues, on the Sukhoi deal, the Sukhoi deal is a long story. Sometime before the 96 elections, even when the deal had not been finalized, the Narasimha Rao government had given some advance money to the Sukhoi factory. Now, this smells like a scandal. Mr. Vajpayee was informed about it, but he says, before I take it up as a political issue, it's a defense matter, let me understand the issue. And then he was briefed that no, there was no scandal. The then Russian President Yeltsin was in trouble. He says, I need some immediate cash so that we can have some activities in that area. That factory employs a lot of people, and we'll adjust against the price. Now, realizing that India in the 1990s needed Russia badly, because Russia was no more the old Soviet Union, very strong, to the weakened country, but it was the only veto-wielding member of the UN Security Council. So Narasimha Rao government took this forward and gave the cash. So in the 96 elections, Vajpayee and the BJP did not raise Sukhoi as a deal. Later on, the US government completed the deal, sorted it out, and Mulayam Singh Defense Minister made a statement in the Lok Sabha. Under the rules of a Lok Sabha, when a minister makes a statement, it's called a suo motu statement on his own. No question answer is allowed. In the Rajya Sabha, it is allowed. But when Mr. Mulayam Singh made the statement, and by now Mr. Vajpayee had again been briefed about the full details by the government, he and Mr. Jaswant Singh were fully briefed about it. When Mr. Mulayam Singh made the statement, Mr. Vajpayee got up in the Lok Sabha, breaking parliamentary procedure, and praised the government, saying this is good for India. So, his partymen were surprised. Why are you praising the government? He was not praising the government. He was merely saying that on such issues, politics cannot come in the way. The security of India is above power, is above being opposition, and you must. So that throughout his life, I think he demonstrated that on key security and defense issues, foreign policy issues, the country must speak with one voice.
Right. And as we are talking about the relation he had with the other party members, when Mrs. Indira Gandhi liberated Bangladesh, there was a controversy or a talk, we could say, that Vajpayee ji said that she was acting as goddess Durga. And you stated that it never happened. So how did it come about?
I remember the controversy because unlike you people, I was then in class 10. So I remember I was interested in politics in 1971. And the rumor then only started that he has called her a Durga. Mr. Vajpayee, at that stage, it was not a major controversy. But later on, he referred to, he says, no, I've never said so. This you said it in Parliament. He says, okay, let us look at the parliamentary record because Parliament records are outstanding. Everything spoken in Parliament is recorded. They're called parliamentary proceedings. Then the MP who has spoken is sent a copy of it. Please see whether we have recorded it correctly or do you want to make some minor changes. That's allowed. He says, I've been through all the records. I've never said so. Now they said, no, you did not say it in Parliament. He said it in the Connaught Place in a public meeting, not recorded properly. I don't know. He himself said in Parliament when I was present, I have never, he says, yes, we appreciated her action in Bangladesh. We supported her, again, for the same reason, nation comes first. But I have never called her a Durga. He says, prove to me that I have done so. And nobody proved it. So rumors are rumors. When he's challenging people to prove and nobody comes forward to prove it, then I will believe him when he says, I did not call her Durga. It makes for good news. It makes for good gossip. But sometimes reality is not so good.
Right. And it said that forming a government is one thing and gaining confidence in the parliament is another. And in 1998, when BJP emerged as the largest party, and NDA, if not having the complete majority, was having a majority where was having the
Near
it
majority.
near to the majority. So then too, Mr. R.K. Narayan asked Vajpayee ji to get the letter of support in written. So do you feel that he was being impartial or partial toward the Vajpayee government, or he was acting in the mandate of the constitution or beyond the mandate of the constitution?
My own understanding, which I have written in the book, I felt that President K.R. Narayanan went beyond the book. It was not required. Not that anything could stop him. Nothing. It's not written down in Constitution. These are procedures and these are precedents which follow. Normally, majority party gets it, majority alliance gets it immediately. If you're close to it and nobody else comes forward, you should be asked to form a government. It happened before. It happened in 89. It happened in 91. It happened in 96. That the person being asked to form the government did not have a majority on that date, but there were no other claimants. And therefore, country cannot afford to have no government. In 98, the NDA started with 251 when results came out. Very soon, there were 260 plus. I think 263 or 264. Just 6-7 short of a majority. No other claimants. They should simply been asked, okay, come, have the swearing in oath, and within 1 month, 2 weeks, demonstrate a majority, which had the precedent which has developed over time. That too is not the constitution, but precedents developed in parliamentary democracies. That was not done. It was delayed and delayed. And then the president asked him to produce letters of support. Now, pre-alliance partners, they have campaigned as an alliance. They have campaigned on the point that Vajpayee is prime minister, Atal Bihari. They have campaigned on that, whether it was Jayalalitha in Tamil Nadu, Mamata Banerjee in Bengal, They all campaigned on that. In which case, you have been just asked. By asking for letters, you allowed the smaller parties to raise their demand of support. Till then, they had no option. They were part of an alliance. So that instance, so by the time Mr. Vajpayee could get the letters and form a government, his position had become weakened. And that I thought was unfair. It was not really parliamentary. It did not go in accordance with the parliamentary traditions that we had developed over time. And it has not been repeated either after that. This was the only time it happened, which is why I felt that the late President K.R. Narayanan definitely, I thought, went beyond what was required.
Right. And I think when we talk about forming of the government, coalition does come into picture. And though there are famous saying that Vajpayee ji talked about coalition dharma, the coalition dharma was not very easy. And the coalition dharma came with a give and take relationship where the coalition partners wanted the use of Article 356 in every states they were present. So on this day of Republic Day, Article 356, 72 years, 70 years after, how do you see Vajpayee handled it? Because he did not succumb to that demand.
No, he did not succumb to the demand. They did try to use it in Bihar, but that's a exceptional case. I'll explain it. In a coalition, there'll be give and take. That we must understand. Politics is the art of the possible. It is not an ideal world. Ram Rajya to hai nahi. So you will have pulls and pressures, which is fine. In fact, even after his allies made life difficult for him, Mr. Vajpayee was on record saying, no, they are not wrong. They are just reflecting pent-up frustrations. Regional aspirations have not been met, and it is coming out in this form. We must be appreciative of it and try to reason it out. Right? So now the trouble was that the NDA partners were mostly in opposition in their own states, the way it came from. Bengal, Odisha, Bihar, Tamil Nadu. These are the four primary states. They were in the opposition. And therefore, those coalition partners felt that they needed a level playing field, that the incumbent state governments were not allowing them to function. I'll be a little generous to them, but some cases were just frustration, case of Tamil Nadu, and therefore they wanted 356 to be used. Now, after the Bombay case, after the UP case just before the elections, 98 elections, it was clear, one, that 356 cannot be used loosely. The courts will come down hard on it. That's the legality. The morality was, if you try to use 356, it's a two-way traffic. And therefore, it would not help the NDA ultimately. It will go against the NDA. And therefore, they tried it out. They got a lot of flack from the allies more than anybody else, while the opposition attacked them, you are catering to the allies. So they were getting it from both sides. When they sent teams to Tamil Nadu and Bengal and Bihar, now legally under 355, this is permissible. Article 55 of the Constitution is permissible. That would be 276. But people, 256, people were hammering at them. The government stuck on, and ultimately the government actually fell only because of one of the major reasons for the Tamil Nadu withdrawal of support, because Jayalalitha wanted the MK out of power, among other things. So it was a difficult thing. Fortunately, now 356 is almost a dead letter of the Constitution, unless in the worst of worst cases where everything breaks down, Government of India cannot invoke 356 anymore, particularly after the Uttarakhand and the Arunachal Pradesh cases, where you have to put different orders, but ultimately the Supreme Court says 356 is not sustainable. So they have given different logic in the two cases, in the Arunachal case and the Uttarakhand case. Yet, basically, 356 is now almost a dead letter, which is actually a tragedy because it should be available to you to use as an exception. It cannot be used as a tool to settle scores, which is what Mr. Vajpayee was under pressure when he was the Prime Minister in 98-99.
Right. And as you said that you will talk about Bihar, we would want you to talk about Bihar right now because Bihar became a major embarrassment for the government. And Vajpayee ji was not actually the person who took the decision of recommending president's role, but he was a team member if we have to take it out of that. And he supported that move, got it passed through the Lok Sabha, but withdrew it in Rajya Sabha. Why don't you talk about that?
No, see, they tried to do Bihar once politically, President returned it, rightly so. Then Bihar went through a phase of continuous violence against Dalits. Two major massacres of Dalits took place within 10 days, and the government was simply incapable of moving. The Bihar government of Rabri Devi, with Lalu Yadav actually in control, was simply incapable. Even the Congress party said that the Abdi government has lost all moral authority to rule. So going in for president at that stage made sense. Prime Minister Vajpayee was not in India. We were in Jamaica then when it happened. But the facts came. He signed on the facts and he faxed it back. So his stamp was there. It's not that he was not behind it. No, his stamp was very much there. It went to the president, and this time the president agreed with it. Yes. But then the Congress decided to play politics. And the day after he returned from Lahore, they took out, yes, we will not support it. Having supported it in the beginning, having encouraged the government to do it, they then backed out because they wanted to create political trouble. They were not interested in the fact that Dalits were dying in Bihar. They wanted to use this to embarrass the government, which they did. And therefore, in the Lok Sabha, they went through. They knew that in the Rajya Sabha, they did not have the numbers without the Congress's support. So they literally had no option but to back out, So it had to handle badly also because after we got President Shru, it was announced by the Home Minister and George Fernandez, both of them, that Bihar will have an apolitical governor who will be good in administration to turn around the state. Good sentiment. The moment they said apolitical, administrative sound governor, Lalu Yadav jumped on. So we were saying that the present Bihar governor, who's a BJP person, Sudhir Singh Bhandari, was a biased person. See, now your Home Minister is also saying that. So, it turned around. Politics has to be very clear in what you say and what you do. The BJP definitely mishandled it. And as a result, it was a major embarrassment. And Rabri Devi came back to power regrettably. And immediately after that, there was a third massacre of Dalits, just to show that the Rabri Devi government was simply incapable of governing Bihar, but Vajpayee government would do nothing about it.
Right. Maybe it can justifiably be said that sometimes the political decisions must not be the right decisions.
Yeah.
They should be the acceptable decisions. But moving forward, one of the biggest achievements of the Vajpayee tenure, and mind you, this comes at a time when he still did not have a very comfortable majority in the parliament. The national agenda of governance had a lot of pulls and pressures coming around. May 11th, which also happens to be your birthday, happened Operation Shakti, which also coincides with your name. So why don't you talk about the feeling inside the room after the operation was successful, because you were in that room?
Mr. Vajpayee was clear, world should be nuclear free. But if the world has nuclear powers, and one nuclear power is sitting on 50,000 square kilometers of Indian territory, China, and has given missile and nuclear technology to Pakistan, so India is facing threat from the north and the west. For its security, India needed nuclear weapons, and therefore India must test. So it supported Mrs. Gandhi in 74 when she tested the first time, but then she panicked and backed out. Mr. Narasimha Rao tried to test, could not test. Americans told him, you can test, but then you'll have to pay a heavy price. So he was clear that we had to test. The national agenda of government actually mentioned that India will keep the nuclear option open, and therefore they tested. Now, when the results message came from the secure phone line that had been successful, obviously there was great happiness. Mr. Vajpayee, Mr. Advani, others, very, very, Jaswant Sinha, tremendous amount of happiness in the room. But it was a happiness sobered by the reality that as a nuclear weapon state, India has to now act responsibly. And that while it was a life ambition that India become a nuclear weapons power, now you're demonstrating to the world you are one, it does not mean that the challenge is over now. The challenges will now begin. So it was happiness sobered by reality. It was not triumphalism. It was not at all the feeling, we won the world. No, not at all. Yes, with this, our security becomes a little better, not completely, but considerably better. And we have told the world we are nuclear weapons power. We have the potential to become a major world power. So I think these two factors were very important. And therefore, India had to test, tested, and we came out strong.
And then when we came out strong, and as we also talked about that Vajpayee had a flair for foreign policy, the pressure that came from most of the nations, specifically from the United States, who considerately had a very soft corner for Pakistan at that point in time. How was that taken into account was when it was decided that we'll test, and what happened afterwards?
The pressure was tremendous from the United States, not because of Pakistan so much as because of China also. USA and China were moving very close to each other. Clinton was to go to China. And he was already talking about the G2 to run the world. And India being a nuclear power suddenly changed all that. It went against the international regime, the NPT and the CTBT, Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, neither of which India was a signatory to. So we didn't break the law, because it's not our law, but it broke the international law. So there was a pushback. Pakistan soon tested. We were seeing if you did not test, Pakistan would not have tested. Well, if Pakistan did not have a nuclear program, how could they have tested in 18 days? They had, so this both of it came out to the world. It was a slap in the face for people who wanted to hide things. So we faced tremendous amount of political ostracism, economic sanctions, denial of access to money from the World Bank, the cheap money from the World Bank and the ADB, all other political these things. I think for the next 4 or 5 months was horrible, really horrible. Not once did these people think, did we do the right thing or not? They knew they had done the right thing. They knew they would have to pay a price. Maybe they did not know what the price would be. They knew what to the price. And the belief in what they've done was right, was so strong, that India must be strengthened, was so strong that they managed to ride over that period of sanctions.
Right. And I'll still like to continue in this. And as you said that America utilizes soft power by blockading the proposals in World Bank, IMF, and the other organization instead of outrightly saying so, because the sanctions did not have so much of money around that.
Mm.
But another interesting point that you raise is that it was not so much because of the soft corner for Pakistan, but for China. And at that point in time, India was saying that its security needs are threatened not only because of Pakistan, but because of China, which the world was not really accepting
Mm.
of. So how do you see that situation change when eventually it changed? And
Yeah,
as you mentioned that one of the
yeah,
most interesting or the most important speeches that Vajpayee makes was at Asia Society when he called United States and India natural allies. Why don't you
yeah,
talk a bit about that?
yeah. You know, I mean, we had to tell the world Pakistan is not our equal. It's not our enemy. It's an irritant. It bothers us. It kills people in our country. But Pakistan is not a security threat to India, really. The potential threat, and we use the word potential, was China. China was on Indian territory. China and Pakistan had nuclear collaboration and missile collaboration, which made us insecure. Uh, Sanctions time, people didn't believe it. And we had to explain again and again the realities of the world, the change situation where Pakistan and India had diverged so much. This is not the 60s. We had really diverged. We had two different worldviews. We are an outward looking country. Pakistan was supporting jihadis in Afghanistan. They were into jihad terrorism. We were not into all that. And therefore, the need to reach out two things to dehyphenate India and Pakistan. Do not see us in the same eyes. Our policies are not Pakistan guided. They may be China guided to that extent, a reaction to China, not Pakistan. So you have to do two things. One that you mentioned, we reached out to the United States, very difficult negotiations between Strobe Talbot on the American side and Jaswant Singh on the Indian side, and to tell the USA, listen, your interests and my interests are actually the same. Can we work together? Because we realized that the pendulum history had swung. America was the sole superpower. Both democracies, both wanting international system to be legal based, rule based order, liberal international order. We had to reach out to the United States, and therefore the need to call US and India natural allies, which we did. Shocked people, really shocked. Other parallel was to reach out to Pakistan, to tell the world, listen, we have tested, they have tested. We don't want an insecure South Asia. One, to reach out to Pakistan to develop better equations with Pakistan, and to tell you that Pakistan is not my enemy. The enemy I'm talking about is the North. And therefore, you have to subtly, very subtly, dehyphenate Pakistan. Yes, with Pakistan, we want to have peace. It's easier to have peace with Pakistan, but the contentions are much minor. And we actually, Vajpayee's letter to Americans said, India and China have better relations now, but this overhang of occupation and nuclear missile cooperation with Pakistan is still there. So it's a very complex situation that you had to handle. So the outreach to Pakistan, outreach to the USA were both required in the post-test period to tell the world, please dehyphenate, please understand my problems. We are not adventure seeking. We do not want to upset the world. We only want to protect ourselves better. So, that's why it was required.
Right. And I think one of the things that we missed out was that Pakistan has tested its missile Gauri just a few days before the Pokhran test had actually taken place. And what they had claimed was that it was about 1,500 kilometers of range, and so our important cities did come into picture. And after that, having a nuclear deterrent actually becomes a much important thing. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us. This was our part one of conversation, where we tried to touch upon Vajpayee's foreign policy, how coalition pressures did build in his initial years, he was a statesman, and what happened in Pokhran. In part two of the conversation, we'll talk again with Shakti sir on the bus to Lahore, the famous or infamous Kargil war, how Vajpayee ji was actually as a person, was he hardworking or not, or is public speaking the only thing that he should actually be remembered by? The Kaveri deal that is the Kaveri the Kaveri River Authority that finally comes up in his administration, that is not much talked about. We'll talk about that in episode 2. Please join us again next time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shakti sir, for joining us.
Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon for latest updates.